Hello amigos! In this video let's compare two different approaches to slow riding in general and U-turns specifically. I like to call them the American and European styles. You'll see why later. Of course, this doesn't mean you can't use the American method if you live in England, or that the European style is off limits for you if you're in United States. These are just arbitrary labels for two distinct approaches. If you watched any of my videos about slow speed riding in general and U-turns in particular, you probably noticed that I really recommend mastering the so-called friction zone technique, in which we make a good use of our clutch. The concept behind it is pretty simple. When we pull in the clutch, we disengage the engine from the transmission, which means that no matter how much we twist the throttle, the bike won't move. When we release the clutch, the engine reconnects with the transmission, and now the bike responds to throttle input. But there is more to it. If we start releasing the clutch very slowly, at some point the bike starts to move forward slightly. This is called the biting point of the clutch. The range between the biting point and fully released clutch is called the friction zone. In this friction zone, we intentionally allow the clutch to slip a bit, giving us smooth, precise control over exactly how much power reaches the rear wheel. By keeping the throttle slightly open and working the clutch within the friction zone, we can effortlessly control the bike's turning radius and trajectory. Pulling the clutch in slightly slows down the bike, and if we keep our arms relaxed, the handlebars naturally turn more, reducing the turning radius. On the contrary, releasing the clutch slightly gives us a boost in speed, increasing the turning radius. This technique is incredibly versatile and works for nearly any slow-speed maneuver on virtually any bike. Great success! But sometimes I get questions, usually from European riders, who ask something like this. Why use the clutch at all? Can't we just use the rear brake to slow down instead? It's a valid question, more so. Many riders in Europe are taught this way in motorcycle schools. Not all of them, but many. The core principle is the same as before. By applying the rear brake, we can slow down the bike and reduce the turning radius. Releasing the brake and adding throttle increases the speed and widens the turning radius. Can it be done? Absolutely. As you can see here, slow speed riding is possible without even touching the clutch. Great success once again! So, which of those methods is better? The friction zone or the throttle and rear brake? Many schools in Europe favor the throttle and rear brake method because it's easier for beginners to learn. Instead of juggling the throttle, clutch and rear brake all at the same time, new riders can focus on just two controls: throttle and brake. It's a logical choice for teaching, and it works. However, this method has a couple of drawbacks. First is the stalling risk. Without the clutch, at slow speed we risk stalling the bike. On smaller bikes with shorter gearing, this isn't a huge issue. They can crawl at very low speeds without stalling. But bigger bikes, especially those with taller gearing, have a higher minimum speed in first gear. Here is a nice visual comparison. A 250cc bike can easily roll at walking speed without stalling. A 690cc bike, even at idle, moves much faster, and now I have to run to keep up. Because of this, for larger bikes, stalling mid-maneuver is more likely, and once a heavy bike starts to tip over, it is not so easy to keep it upright by just putting our feet down. Physically holding, let's say, 250 kilos of a liter bike from falling with our own muscles is much more difficult than holding 130 kilos of some 250cc bike. So stalling is certainly a bigger problem for larger bikes. And the second problem with the throttle and rear brake approach is the minimum speed. Even on smaller bikes, the throttle and rear brake method requires carrying some speed through maneuvers. This works fine in open spaces, like for example making a simple U-turn on an empty road. But in tight confined spaces, like when we are filtering through standstill traffic, we need the ability to go much slower and even stop completely if needed. This is where the friction zone technique shines, offering complete control, even when the bike is barely crawling forward. With all that being said, we can see that the throttle and rear brake method and the friction zone method aren't really competitors. One is not necessarily better than other. They're simply different tools for different jobs. The friction zone is ideal for ultra-slow maneuvers, like U-turns or filtering through traffic, especially on larger bikes. The throttle and rear brake method works better when the bike is moving a bit faster and there is no risk of stalling. For example, we can often see new riders pulling the clutch when making simple turns at intersections. While it feels like a relatively slow speed turn, the bike is actually moving too fast to have a chance to stall. In this situation, we can definitely just let the clutch out completely and focus on throttle control. So, the friction zone is not always the one and only technique which we must use. The reason I emphasize the friction zone technique and various slow speed exercises utilizing it on this channel is just because it's a simple and very effective way to build essential skills like balance, vision, body position, steering, leaning and relaxed arms. These skills apply to normal riding, and practicing them at low speeds minimizes risk. If we make a mistake and drop the bike, the consequences are far less severe than a high-speed crash. Plus, all we need is our bike and parking lot. No special equipment, fancy tires, no special setup is required. Nothing. Slow-speed training is an affordable and accessible way to improve our riding, which is exactly why we love it here. Great! Before we wrap up, a shout out to our sponsor, Ultramax Cell, the maker of high-tech thermal base layers. These base layers are made with a special polypropylene fiber and unique 3D honeycomb structure. They wick away moisture quickly, boost cooling in hot weather and trap air to keep our body warm in the cold. It's a fantastic upgrade over regular thermal wear. I can highly recommend checking it out. I'll leave the Amazon link in the description along with their direct contact, so you can ask them any questions and potentially get better deals depending on your location. On this positive note, it is time to wrap it up. Thank you for watching, ride safely and have a wonderful day. Bye!